Well, I didn't grow up intending to be in public service. I didn't look past my education, which always from the beginning had been an aspiration to go to law school. So I did go to law school, but in the summers of law school, I worked as a police officer. My father was friends with the sheriff in Clark County and helped me get a job in the court system as a policeman. When I got back from law school, I was playing in a basketball game and ran into a friend, asked him what he was doing, and he said he's a deputy district attorney. I said, that sounds interesting. He said, well, that guy over there is an assistant DA. Go talk to him. I did, and I was hired. A couple years later, the sheriff came to me and said, I'd like you to be the advisor, the legal advisor to the police department. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I was appointed to be a justice of the peace, a lower court criminal magistrate. Something I hadn't anticipated, but it was a great opportunity. I did that for a couple of years, and I thought to myself, I think I could be the district attorney. I think I know what's going on there. I've been doing it for years now. And I threw my hat in the ring, ran for district attorney, and was fortunately successful. In the middle of the term, when I was contemplating what to run for re-election, I had been president of the National District Attorneys Association. And one of the DAs, who was kind of a mover and a shaker, indicated that it should be my turn next year. I thought, well, that would be interesting. At the same time, the Attorney General of the United States, of the state of Nevada, Dick Bryan, came to me and said, why don't you run for Attorney General? I said, no, I'm going to run for re-election. He said, well, you can't do that. No DA's ever been re-elected. And if you do that, that'll be the end. You won't never be governor. And I said, governor? Who said anything about being governor? Well, I did run for re-election. I was re-elected. At that time, it changed a little bit, my looking forward, because the same Dick Bryan, who was now governor, came to me and said, why don't you run for lieutenant governor? And I thought, well, I can either be district attorney for life, wishful thinking, or I can try and take the whole state in and my responsibilities. So I ran for lieutenant governor. With the time, I knew that it was very possible that the governor, Dick Bryan, would run against an incumbent senator, Chick Heck, and if he was to win, the lieutenant governor, i.e. me, would become governor. In fact, that's what happened. And then I was able to win 2 elections as governor of my own. So I didn't have a foreplan at all. I just kind of stumbled from one thing to another, which ended up allowing me to become governor, which was a great opportunity.
Well, my journey is somewhat similar to the governor's, and it's interesting how Nevada's a small place and things intersect. But I grew up in a rural area of a small town called Sparks, Nevada, on a dirt road. We raised sheep, and neither of my family had been in politics or been involved. I always had a great admiration for people in politics and in public service. And so I was always involved in student government, but thought, that's about as far as it was going to go. I went on to law school, and a couple years after I finished law school, I was working in a law firm. And one of my friends was interviewing assembly candidates, legislative candidates. And he said for me to come along and watch. And I sat in this room and watched them and thought, I know as much as these people do. And just so happened that I had moved into a place in Reno where the incumbent was running for governor against Governor Miller. His name was Jim Gibbons. And so I decided to run. He did not endorse me. He endorsed my opponent. I was fortunate to be elected. I served 2 terms in the legislature, and then I got a phone call from a governor, Governor Miller. And asking if I'd be interested in an appointment to the Nevada Gaming Commission. And again, I finished that. I ran for Attorney General, was elected to that. Then I was appointed to serve as a federal judge. And while I was federal judge, I was approached to run for governor. And if I were to run for governor, my primary opponent would be Jim Gibbons.
Right.
And so I was fortunate to be elected and serve 2 terms as governor. But I think back to the initial question, I've always loved my state. I've loved my community. I wanted to be in a position where I could hopefully make a difference in education, in healthcare, economic development, roads, the environment, what have you. And so I was very blessed to be able to do that.
So they can see what a good choice it was to appoint you to the Gaming Commission.
That's right.
Because you've done pretty darn good since then.
Yeah, if not for the governor, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing group of these delegates for the Western Governors Foundation, the leadership program. And I think politics and public service is a lot more difficult now than when I was first a candidate in the 90s. And those old days, it used to be that the deadline was 5 o'clock for the press, and newspaper would hit the driveway or the porch at 5 o'clock that morning, and the news cycle was basically based on that. And now it's moment to moment. And, people, don't always tell the truth, and I think it's really hard to run for office, but I still believe, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think there's a large group of young people who really want to make a difference in people's lives. And I think it takes even more courage than ever to run now. And as I looked at the biographies of the different fellows or the delegates, was really impressed in the different areas that they're in, and I'm hopeful that they will also seek to get a appointed office or elected office so that they can take the lessons that they've learned, not only at this meeting, but the ones that they learned in their respective states.
I agree with that. And I think it's unfortunate that there are fewer people advocating in public service life than there was years ago. It's difficult in there, not just in making decisions, but because of virtual attacks and some literal attacks, it's discouraging people from participating. I have a son who was elected twice Secretary of State of Nevada. He was the youngest in the history of the state of Nevada. And then he ran for Attorney General, was not successful, but he ran again for County Commission and was successful. He's about to complete that term, and he's not running for re-election. He said, without mischaracterizing it, it's too discouraging. And I hope that these young students, and those of us that were on the stage, former governors, and others like with positions of responsibility and influence, can talk about the qualities of public service, how important it is, and help encourage others to follow in the footsteps of public leaders like yourself that's had a whole career in it.
No, thank you. Nevada is a small place, so when Governor Miller's son served as Secretary of State, I was the governor. And so I got to serve with his son as well. But it goes back to civility and not rewarding bad behavior. And I think all too often that's what's happened in a conversation that we just had as a group. In a lot of instances, it's all about clicks and provocative news and provocative headlines. And some journalists are rewarded for the amount of clicks that they get on their story, so they sensationalize their story so they can get more clicks. And I'd just like to see more balanced news and not the attacks that really discourage people.
The attacks are so personal now. Mischaracterizations, outright falsehoods, makes it difficult to want to participate. And And somehow we've got to find a way through that. These young people that are delegates here are a great starting point, but 30 so of them are not going to resolve the problem.
Right.
Hopefully they can multiply and prosper.
Well, and it's about setting an example. And you set an example for me. I set an example for the next generation of politicians and public servants to conduct themselves in a certain way. And now hopefully these delegates are going to leave here with an impression and getting the benefit of the wisdom from former governors from multiple states.
Yeah, well, your biography is really impressive, and I think others can emulate it. You've gone from every aspect of government and survived them all.
No, I've had the blessing of being in all branches of government and now higher education, so I've seen a lot of different things. And I am concerned. I'm on a college campus now, and you see how some of the students, it's all about, as I said, the social media and how many impressions that they can have, and the more provocative you are, the more likely it is to get more of those likes. So it creates this cycle that doesn't stop.
And hopefully to get them to traditional journalism, because it's difficult when you're just dealing with the internet and people are throwing things out there as if they're fact right away, and that's the only information you're getting. It's not over at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
It's all night long.
It's all night long, all day long, 24/7.
Well, I think it's difficult because of the environment that we're in right now, which hopefully will be modified. And because of the media and the internet and the vitrilistic comments made by people in public office or seeking public office, it makes it difficult. I think that one thing you could do is, number one, be involved. You might not want to be on the YMCA board of directors for yourself, but there's other people on the YMCA board of directors that are going to support you because they know you, or Big Brothers and Big Sisters, or the American Cancer Society, all of which I was on. I met people in those, and people that ordinarily wouldn't know me, or certainly wouldn't support me because they wouldn't have any knowledge, knew me from those volunteering organizations. So that's what advice I would give. Also, and it might not go heated, but I would try and be as moderate as possible within the realm of partisan politics. Try and be as nonpartisan as you can and still be the nominee and elected to your particular office.
And I agree with the governor, not to rely on social media for your news. And as he said, to get involved and know your community. I think that volunteering and getting out there is something that doesn't happen as much as it used to. And getting off those phones and having conversations like this, because I'll see a lot of students that are just looking at their phone and not really getting their head out of the computer and listening to others. So it's a lot of things that I think could come together. I'm very optimistic about the future in the students that we have, but it's getting harder and harder as time moves on.
I would say I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in a moment in time where the negatives seem to be prospering. And for the next several months in this presidential election, we're going to hear truths less than we're going to hear untruths and falsehoods and personal attacks. I hope that doesn't discourage people. Particularly, hopefully, that people still go and vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important to get out and vote in our state. more and more people are registering as nonpartisan and not as Republican and Democrats because the parties have gotten so extreme. And one of my concerns that I didn't really talk about today is with the way our primary system works, those nonpartisans can't vote in the primaries, which means you're going to have more extreme candidates that are going to go to the general elections. I don't have an answer today except for that, hopefully people will not get discouraged. They will get involved and get out and vote.
Hopefully, even though they're not voting in the primaries, they will make a cautious, sensible decision.
Yeah.
Because they potentially will decide the election, the nonpartisans, because the hardcore of either party are roughly about the same. So it's the middle that isn't committed that really going to be the ultimate deciding factor.
No, and the governor's right, because those nonpartisans are dissatisfied Republicans and Democrats that truly are in the middle. And so those are the people that I'm hoping don't get discouraged and do get out and vote, because they will be determinative in the election.
Yep. Well, certainly I think it's a possibility to see a Westerner. I guess Ronald Reagan was the last Westerner. And ironically, in 1982, he created a task force on victims of crime. And I was the only Democrat on it of 9 people. He was more moderate than is the case right now, and that even though he's held out as a beacon of light by many Republicans, a lot of them don't follow the philosophies that he did. For example, he and Tip O'Neill, the legislative leader, were personal friends after fighting about issues. I think if the same can be true of any Westerner. I think Governor Newsom of California has the financial wherewithal to be a Westerner. Mitt Romney, Utah, had the potential, and those are just isolated instances. So I think it's logical to assume that it can, not necessarily won't, be a time for another Democrat or Republican governor from the West.
No, and I certainly would like to see somebody from the West rise. And just listening to the former governors today, many of them would make excellent presidents, in my humble opinion. But I think there needs to be in the White House a Western perspective and a recognition of what's happening. I mean, the demographics in the West are changing dramatically, and I think that's an important line of sight for the White House for a future candidate to have. I mean, obviously it's not happening in this cycle. 2028, I think, is going to be a very interesting time to see who comes out of this new time of candidates. And as I said, I think Western governors are problem solvers. I think they're individuals that really are dealing with the issues of the day head on a daily basis. They're very sensitive to, as I said, the changing demographics and that what that means to the economy. It's the fastest growing part of the country. So I certainly will be watching with a lot of interest.
And I overlooked the fact that the president, vice president's from the West. May or may not be a candidate for president at some point in time, but she's a Westerner at least. Well, for me, once I completed being governor, I wanted to explore the business world. And I ended up serving on about 5 or 6 publicly traded companies. That has been an interesting experience, a byproduct that I had not anticipated when I was running for governor or getting reelected. I've completed those board services with one exception now. In any case, my perspective hasn't really changed very much. I appreciated the opportunity to do things that I thought were in the better interests of everybody. And that's always been my goal.
And for me, I began my career in the 90s. And as I said, when I was in the legislature, Governor Miller was my governor. And he won't remember this, but I certainly do. I had a bill that I was sponsoring, and I got it through the assembly, and it passed unanimously. And then I got it into the Senate, and in the hearing, somebody from his cabinet sought to kill the bill and hadn't testified, and I had talked to him and said they were supportive. And I talked to the governor, and he said that isn't the right thing to do. And that bill passed. And so I was always grateful, and that was something I remembered. But, as I went through, I worked with a Democratic speaker, and he was very good to me, Joe Dini, somebody that you worked well with as the Attorney General. I worked with both sides of the aisle. And then as governor, I had Democratic majorities in 3 of my 4 sessions as governor of Nevada, and it was always very collaborative. So I was very grateful for that. I'm not finished yet. I serve as the president of a university now, the University of Nevada in Reno, and everything that I learned in my public service has informed what I do now. And education was always a big priority for me, as it was Governor Miller. And so, I'm grateful for the experience that I've had throughout my career in public service so that I can advance higher education in the state of Nevada. I will say public service politics tests you. And there are 2 ways you can go. And all of the time, the tougher road is to make the harder decisions that could affect your ability to stay in public service. And so that's what I try to teach and to model for the young people now is, you can't please everybody, or else you're going to be lying to somebody. And you have to make those hard decisions and do what you think is right. So I'm grateful for that in my career in public service, because it really has taught me the importance of having the courage of conviction and having that value of wanting to make your community better and your state better.
And if I could be so bold, I would characterize you as a moderate, which in my estimation is the best type of public servant. Somebody that's willing to listen to both sides, make an informed decision based on the facts and not on emotionalism or constituency support. I think you embody that, and that's what made you a good governor.
Yeah, well, thank you, Governor. And as I said, I had great examples, Paul Laxalt and you and Bill Raggio and Joe Dini and Kenny Gwynn, and all of them taught me to work across the aisle.